December 31st, 2025, the final day of a year that has been anything but ordinary. As we reflect on a year of political drama and legal battles, a few moments stand out when the mask of power slipped in open court, revealing truths that had long been hidden from public view. In American courtrooms, truth often emerges at the most unexpected times, sometimes in a single sentence or a slip of the tongue that changes everything. Twice this year, lawyers defending the Trump administration made admissions so damaging they shook the very foundation of their cases, leaving even seasoned observers stunned. These weren't minor errors, they were confessions that threatened to unravel entire legal strategies, exposing weaknesses that had been carefully concealed. In one case, a Trump-appointed prosecutor admitted to a procedural failure that called the whole prosecution into question, casting doubt on months of work, and raising new questions about the integrity of the process. In another, a Supreme Court filing contained arguments that, if accepted, would force the court to rule against the administration's own policy. An astonishing twist that left legal experts scrambling to interpret the implications. These moments weren't just bad days, they were turning points, exposing legal strategies built on shaky ground and forcing everyone involved to confront uncomfortable realities. In the high-stakes world of law and politics, even the most powerful can falter. No one is immune to the consequences of a single misstep. When those mistakes involve constitutional rights and the limits of power, they become more than blunders. They become history, shaping the way future generations will understand justice and leadership. Tonight we'll examine these extraordinary admissions, why they cause such shock, and what they mean for the future, not just for the people in the courtroom, but for the nation as a whole. This isn't just about legal jargon, it's about accountability, equality before the law, and the collision of politics with the principles of justice. It's about the moments when the system is tested and the public demands answers. The story of these admissions is a test of our democracy's very foundations, a reminder that the pursuit of truth in open court is as vital now as it has ever been. The first shock came in November as the nation watched a legal drama unfold that would soon send shockwaves through the justice system. It happened during the controversial prosecution of former FBI Director James Comey, a case already under intense public scrutiny and media attention. U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, a Trump appointee, was pressed by Judge Nachmanoff about the process used to obtain the indictment, a moment that would prove pivotal. Halligan admitted, under questioning, that the full grand jury never saw or voted on the final indictment. Only the foreperson did, a revelation that stunned the courtroom. In the American legal system, this is a profound error, one that strikes at the very heart of due process and the integrity of grand jury proceedings. The grand jury is meant to check prosecutorial power, not simply rubber stamp it. Its role is to ensure that charges are brought only when justified by evidence. By bypassing the full panel, Halligan sidestepped a fundamental safeguard designed to protect the rights of the accused and the legitimacy of the process. Comey's lawyers seized on the admission, calling it the smoking gun, that proved their claims of prosecutorial misconduct and lack of transparency. This wasn't a mere technicality, it was a fatal flaw, suggesting the case was driven by politics, not justice, and undermining public trust in the process. The admission confirmed long-held suspicions that corners were cut to indict a political opponent, raising questions about fairness and impartiality. For the Department of Justice, it was a crisis. Overnight, the government's own lawyer had handed the defense a powerful weapon and cast doubt on the entire case. The case's foundation was now in question, not because of the evidence itself, but because the rules of justice, meant to protect everyone, weren't followed. The fate of the prosecution and the credibility of the justice system now hung in the balance. To grasp the gravity of Halligan's admission, we need to understand the grand jury. A grand jury, enshrined in the Fifth Amendment, is a group of citizens who decide if there's enough evidence to charge someone with a crime. Their role is to shield citizens from unchecked government power. The prosecutor can't indict alone, the grand jury must agree. Halligan admitted she'd bypassed this safeguard, showing the indictment only to the foreperson. That's not a minor error, it's a violation of constitutional process. This gave Comey's lawyers grounds to argue the indictment was invalid. A judge could now dismiss the case entirely, not for lack of evidence, but because the government broke the rules. Years of work and resources could be undone by this single fundamental mistake. When Halligan made her admission, the courtroom was stunned. Observers reported an audible gasp. Comey's lawyers, long alleging misconduct, saw their claims validated. Judge Nachmanoff's disbelief was clear. Justice had ground to a halt. Comey's team immediately moved to dismiss the case, citing the fatal procedural flaw. Legal experts across the country reacted with shock. Bypassing a grand jury vote isn't a gray area, it's a black and white violation. Many predicted the judge would have to consider dismissal, as letting the case proceed would set a dangerous precedent. The Department of Justice was silent, caught between defending their prosecutor and admitting serious misconduct. The admission created a legal and political firestorm. The fate of the Comey prosecution now rested on a few words spoken under oath. The integrity of the justice system was on trial. All eyes turned to the judge's next move. The second blunder came not in spoken words, but in a Supreme Court filing, an error that would soon echo through the highest levels of American law. In September, Trump administration lawyers petitioned the court to uphold sweeping tariffs already ruled unlawful by multiple lower courts, sparking controversy across the legal and business worlds. Buried in their own arguments, the lawyers described the tariffs as a major shift in trade policy, affecting billions of dollars in commerce and reshaping global relations in ways that could not be ignored. Legal experts quickly realized what had happened. The administration had walked straight into a trap known as the Major Questions Doctrine, a legal principle with enormous consequences. This doctrine, championed by the court's conservatives, says that for policies of vast economic and political significance, only Congress can grant clear authority. It's a safeguard against executive overreach. The court had used it to strike down Biden's climate and student loan policies, setting a powerful precedent for limiting presidential power. Now, Trump's lawyers were describing their own policy in terms that fit the doctrine perfectly, almost as if they were inviting the court to intervene. They were, in effect, making the case for their opponents. This policy is so big, so consequential, it needs explicit congressional approval, not just executive action. The administration's own filing gave the court all it needed to strike down the tariffs, providing ammunition for critics and skeptics alike. It was a spectacular own goal, an argument that proved the other side's point. Legal analysts were astounded, calling it one of the most surprising legal missteps in recent memory. The fate of a central Trump policy now hung on the administration's accidental confession, with the entire nation watching for the court's next move. The Supreme Court faced a defining test, one that would shape the limits of presidential power for years to come. The irony was unmistakable. The Major Questions Doctrine, a tool forged by conservatives to limit executive power, now threatened a Republican president's signature policy. The doctrine says only Congress can authorize policies of massive impact. The Trump administration's lawyers, in trying to emphasize the tariff's importance, handed the court the perfect opportunity to apply its own rule. Would the justices apply the doctrine consistently, even against their own side? The administration had walked into a trap of their own making. The Supreme Court's decision would reveal whether the doctrine was a true legal principle or just a political weapon. The stakes for executive power and the rule of law had never been higher. What happens next? The consequences could be seismic. In the Comey case, the judge must decide whether to dismiss the indictment due to the grand jury error. A dismissal would vindicate claims of political abuse and embarrass the administration. Prosecutor Halligan could face investigation for misconduct. Even if the case survives, the defense now has a powerful argument about government overreach. In the tariff case, the Supreme Court must decide whether to hear it at all. If they do, they'll have to choose: apply the Major Questions Doctrine and strike down the tariffs, or make a partisan exception. Striking down the tariffs would be a major defeat for Trump. Upholding them would damage the court's credibility. Either way, these admissions have set off a chain reaction that will test the integrity of both the courts and the law. The nation waits for the next domino to fall. These courtroom blunders aren't just legal technicalities, they matter to every American. The grand jury process protects us all from wrongful prosecution. When it's bypassed, everyone's rights are at risk. If it can happen to a former FBI director, it can happen to anyone. The tariff case is about who makes the biggest decisions in our country, Congress or the president alone. When presidents act without clear authority, Democracy itself is weakened. These moments test whether our system still works as intended. Are the rules applied equally, or only when convenient? The Trump administration's own lawyers have forced us to confront these questions. The outcomes will send a message about what kind of country we are. One governed by law, or by power and politics. The stakes are nothing less than the future of American democracy.